Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say, following the 3 H's of the channel and all that good stuff. And in this video, it's all about Russia. So, if that sounds like something that you're interested in, definitely pull up a stump with me, and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. Hello everyone. I want to share some creepy and strange stories that I know. Some of these were told to me by my relatives, mainly my grandfather, or other acquaintances. I have also encountered some unexplained incidents in my life. I will also write some stories that I have published in the local newspaper. In some stories, there may be moments for foreigners that could be odd, but I'll try to explain them. I did not change anything in these stories. If there are any distortions, it is because that I have heard or read these stories a long time ago, and my memory isn't what it used to be, so it could distort them. I hope you enjoy them. Also, sorry for my English if it sounds odd. I don't write big and complex texts very often. But first, some basic information about the Republic of Yakutia. Yakutia is located in the Far East in Russia, the largest subject of the Russian Federation in terms of area. However, the population density in it is one of the lowest in Russia, around 1 million people. Winter is long and cold. The average temperature in December and January is around minus 50 degrees Celsius. Summer is short, hot, and dry. The average temperature in June and July is 35 plus Celsius. About the religion. The ethnic Russians, around 40% of the population, are Orthodox Christians. The Sakha people, or Yakut, are around 50% of the population, mostly have a Yakutian version of Tengri faith and shamanism, and some have a syncretized version of Tengri and Orthodoxy. There is also a smaller Siberian culture there, like Ivans, Ivanks, Yukagirs, Dolgans, etc., but I don't know a whole lot about their culture. But the Yakut are a Turkic nation with some Mongolian and Tungusic influences. But enough of that. I'm here to tell some stories. This first one is from my grandfather. So he was just a kid. He decided to go for a walk in the forest with his friend. They end up going further than usual. They come upon a strange structure soon after they get out of the known parts of the woods. It's a shaman's grave. At first, they are scared, but they decide to investigate. A shaman's things are obviously found near the grave. A shaman's tambourine is there. Gradually, their fear recedes, and they start to play with these things. They decide that it would be nice to show these new cool things to the other children in the village. So, they're back on the road to the village. On the way back, they saw a rider on horseback that's heading toward them. This was the headman of the village. He looked at the children's things and asked where they got it from. They told him how they found these things. The headman got angry and worked out some basically UFC style moves on them. He urgently took them to their parents in the village, brought them to their parents and told them what happened. The parents were also enraged and, you can imagine, give them a slap or two, maybe even more UFC moves. They still have to decide what to do. There's a female shaman in a neighboring village. They go to this village. They go to her, telling her what happened. She says that she sensed their approach in advance, and a ritual should be prepared if they want the children to not be in serious trouble. The woman prepares for the ritual, and asks them to go outside. She leaves her house and starts talking after a while. She says, "I did what I could. You should put the things back in place and beg for forgiveness. Then you will understand whether the shaman forgave you or not." The kids did everything she said. The next day, my grandfather's friend wakes up and found out that he can no longer speak. From that day on, he never regained his voice. He lived a long life. Doctors and healers tried to heal him, but all attempts failed. This is story number 2 from my grandfather. He was, again, a kid, but a little older. He was playing with his friends in the forest near his village. It's getting quite late. The campaign is going home. My grandfather goes to his house alone. On the way, he meets a strange, old, thin and tall man. He doesn't recognize this person. This strange person walked up to my grandfather and spake. "What are you doing out here this late, at this hour? Go home quickly. Your little sister misses you. Your grandmother is going to cook your favorite pancakes. Your parents have finished their work and are preparing to have dinner now." This strange man went further down the road. My grandfather thought that it was a family friend who came to visit from a neighboring village. He returned to his home and sees that everything is just as this person had said. He started asking about this person. The family said that no one came to them today. My grandfather told them how he met this man and described his appearance in as best detail as he could. His parents and grandmother became very scared. The man's descriptions matched to one of my grandfather's grandfathers who died long, long ago. My grandfather's grandfather was a dark shaman. Moreover, he was a ravenous shaman. In the Sakha religion, there are 2 types of shamans, white shamans and dark ones. White shamans are serving the gods. They mostly give blessings and heal people. Dark shamans were sort of like, I guess, a gray Jedi. He could use the forces of both upper and lower worlds. But if they could not cope with the inhabitants from the lower world, they would lose control over their own body, and those entities would take control of you. And this is what happened to him. He became a ravenous shaman. Ravenous shamans are obsessed with harming people, primarily their relatives. This event took place at the end of May in 1941. A few weeks later, my grandfather's grandmother died suddenly. Soon, his parents died of hunger and illness due to the war. My grandfather and his sister were sent to an orphanage, where they later were taken from there by relatives and raised. Fast forward from there to another story that my grandfather told me. He was somewhere around 25 years old at the time. He was going to meet his old friend who lived on the other Ulis, another region of Yakutia. Once they meet, there is a celebration. They drink vodka. They decided to go fishing on a local lake the next day. The next day, they arrived at this lake. They started fishing. There was no fish. A few hours later, there's no more fish. My grandfather becomes angry. He says, essentially, "What a shitty lake. Why is there no fish here?" My grandfather's friend got nervous. "I wouldn't dare to say that. You know the rules. You should ask for forgiveness." He says, "No, I believe in the party and Lenin, not in superstitions." His friend says, "It's your choice, but I would be more careful if I were you." In Sakha religion, respect to nature is one of the most important things. When you go out into nature, you shouldn't speak loud. you shouldn't drink, you shouldn't throw garbage. You also should never insult the place where you are, because the spirit of this place can hear you, and it will get angry. So, fast forward some more time. Evening comes. My grandfather and his friend laid in sleeping bags on the shore of the lake. It was very late at night. Through a dream, my grandfather feels like someone is slowly dragging him toward the lake, attempts to wake up his friend who is sleeping next to him, but he can't move or speak. The lake is getting closer and closer. The water is touching his feet. The water has reached his waist, and yet he still can't move. My grandfather gathers all of his strength and starts to cry. The paralysis goes away immediately. There is no one on the side of the lake. His friend comes up to him and asks what happened. He tells him what happened. He says, "What a fool you are. I told you. You're lucky. If it wanted to kill you, you would not have gotten the chance of salvation." Since then, my grandfather stopped doubting in the presence of supernatural powers, but he remained a true believer in the state. Now this one is one that happened to me in the summer of 2007. I was sitting there watching TV. My parents were at work. My grandmother was preparing food. My grandfather is on the outside doing some kind of outside work. I'm having a pretty good day. But then suddenly, a frightened grandfather bursts into the house. He says not to approach the cowsheds under any circumstances. My parents are called. After a while, when he calmed down, he told us what happened. So, he was outside. He went to go check the cowshed. The cows are gone to graze, so the cowshed is empty. He decides that he wants to clean it, so he heads toward it. But before he does this, he stops in the other cowshed that's more abandoned and is just used for tools and food storage. So he goes in there and starts looking for the things he needs. Suddenly, he hears either a roar or a hiss from the far corner. In the far corner, my grandfather sees the silhouette of a child, a very thin child, a child with glowing eyes, and a strange head shape. He freezes in fear. Where he stood, there was a stick for stirring livestock feed around his hand. He picks up this big stick and throws it toward the face of the child thing. The child opens its mouth as if to scream, but nothing comes out. My grandfather runs to the exit, locks the barn door, barricades it, and comes into the house. They call several people to come over late in the evening. I was sent to my room on the second floor of the house, but I could hear some conversations happening downstairs. After a while, everyone goes outside. I was forbidden to go with them, and instead told to go to bed. The next day, everything was as if nothing had happened. My grandfather refused to acknowledge or say what happened. He would just say that everything was going to be okay from now on. I have a theory on what it could be. In the mythology of Saka, there is an evil spirit called, essentially in English, a calf demon, which kills livestock, mainly calves, and it feeds on their life energy. Usually, it appears as a child in a cow's skin. It makes screams like a cow's lowing. Usually, in order to stop it, people call shamans or other people. I read somewhere that to exorcise a spirit, it is necessary that the person who noticed it first pierced it with a knife. Then, the evil spirit will disappear. This next one is something that happened to a classmate of my older brother. So, it was 2005 in the fall, and he was around 17 years old, I believe. they decided to go alone on foot to shoot ducks. They eventually got to the place and shot some ducks. It was getting late in the evening. He was collecting his things when he hears a noise in the bushes nearby. It was too dark. He couldn't see anything. The source of the noise was getting closer and closer. The young man began to get nervous. He called out, "Who's there?" The noise stops. His fear only increased. He heard somewhere that when a suspicious activity starts, he must say, "If you are human, then come here and talk. If you are not human, go away." But he was not a smart person. He was kind of dumb, and was also very afraid of everything at the time. So, he confused the words and places. He said, "If you are human, then go away. If you are not human, then come here and talk," essentially. All of a sudden, it goes black. He wakes up in the morning in a nearby forest. He feels deathly ill. Everywhere on him, there are scratches, bruises, and other abrasions. He doesn't remember anything that happened, or after his speech from the night before. He returned to his camp. All of the ducks that he killed are gone. Everything from his camp is irreparable. He decides to just go home. People said that he periodically gets panic attacks and nightmares. After school, he went to Yakutsk, and I don't know about his destiny after he went there. And this is a story that I heard from somebody who lives somewhere in the Altai. His great-grandmother was among the only people at the time in the family who enjoyed literacy and education. She used it to be a nurse and to perform illegal abortions for desperate people in private. I imagine since the late 1940s. She does so for many years. She uses the same room in her house. My brother, who knew the guy, said that the room was always uncanny, was constantly very cold and eerie. So, his friend's visiting her, and she asked him to go down to this room and get something from there. This made him very uncomfortable. As soon as he got down there, he sees a tall man with pure white skin, covered in chains and blood, standing in the middle of the room. He's taken aback. He blinks. The man disappears back into nothingness. And this one was in Tanka, about 2013, January 15th. It was just after midnight, and it was minus 55 degrees Celsius, and I really needed to go to the bathroom. So I go outside to do my business. I was out there for around 5 or 10 minutes, and suddenly I can hear a conversation that is near. I cannot discern the words though. The speaking is all slurred. I think maybe some local alcoholics are talking near the courtyard, but I'm freezing my ass off, literally, so it's time to go back into the house. I get out of the toilet, and there's nobody around. There's only a few of my own horses that are nearby in their stable. They're looking at me. Their ears are perked up. It's strange. How do these people disappear so quickly? After all, they just talked amongst themselves a few seconds ago. But I return home. Remember that now is Tanka time. I'm starting to remember one ritual, and goosebumps are beginning to crawl. According to Yakut's custom, on the night of January 13th to 14th, to the night of January 18th into 19th, there comes a time of fortune-telling. According to belief, in this time, the god of fate, Tonka Khan Toyan, and other spirits are the closest to the human world, and it is at that time that predictions are the most accurate and true. Some predictions can be quite dangerous if it is incorrect to conduct a ritual. It can lead to physical or mental injury, or even death. For example, if you want to know about your future, you can listen to what the horses say. People hid in a stable and waited for animals to speak in human language, predicting the fate of their owners and their acquaintances. It is noteworthy that if the horses notice the presence of people, they'll kill them. Now let's go back to January of 2010. It was a few days after New Year's. My parents went to a friend's in a neighboring village. The older brother remained in charge, but that night he was also out to a party. At the time, our elder brother's bride was also visiting us. I used to sleep on the second floor in my room, but in those days I slept on the first floor in the living room in front of the TV. The older brother's bride slept across the room. It was around 3 a.m. After decided that I had watched enough TV, I decided to fall asleep. But before I could, I began to hear noises from the second floor. Somebody was walking. This is impossible to enter the second floor from outside without breaking any windows. From the inside, there's only a staircase that leads to the second floor, which is located next to the hall. Meanwhile, the sounds of footsteps above have accelerated. The older brother's bride asked me in a frightened voice, "Can you hear that?" I replied that I heard it too. The footsteps stop. Then, the sound of a door handle began to be heard. Someone or something slowly opened the door on the second floor. Then, it calmed down for a couple of seconds, and then the door handle began to twist. After several more quiet moments and slow actions, someone started repeating it much louder and faster. The bride whispered that she was scared and that I should do something, but I also laid in fear, and I was afraid to move. Then the noises stopped, and the door handle stopped. Footsteps could be heard again. Then suddenly, someone started to loudly smash on the door. All this was repeated for a few seconds, until it ultimately became quiet again. Nobody wanted to get up and go check what was happening upstairs. My older brother returned soon after. We told him what happened. He checked the second floor and found nothing. His version was that it was the spirit of the house. The spirit of the house began to do this because we did not contact him and did not introduce him to the bride. After that, we lit a fire in a hearth. We fed the spirit and explained the situation to him. There was no more noise in the house. One day, a horse breeder decided to return his horses to the stable and went to look for them. He found a place where they grazed. Everyone was there, except for one foal. The man began to look for his foal, but he did not find him nearby. Then he decided to go towards the nearby forest, and soon, next to the forest, he found the footprints of an animal leading into the woods. The horse breeder followed the trail further. He walked through the forest for a long time until he noticed the strangeness. It was absolutely silent in the forest. There was no sound of birds or animals. Then he began to feel strange, as if he was drunk, although he barely ever drank at all. The man decided that he was just tired and went further on the trail until he saw something that greatly frightened him. A gutted foal lay on the ground, being devoured by the creature. The creature was very strange. It was pure white, and it was about the size of a bear, but it had an incomprehensible shape. It was impossible to make out where the head and limbs were. It was also impossible to even imagine and approximate an outline, because the creature seemed to be enveloped in a fog, although There was no fog. The creature heard a noise from the man and stopped moving. He felt its gaze go upon him. They stood for several seconds until the creature suddenly began to become transparent and disappear. When it became fully dissolved, the forest ceased to be quiet, and the strange feeling disappeared from the man. Shortly after this incident, the man faced a series of troubles. First, his wife suddenly left him for another man. Then, for various reasons, his animals began to die off. Then his house burned down. The man became an alcoholic, and in a drunken state, he told his story. At the end, he added that he saw something that an ordinary person should not have seen. So, his life began to collapse. This was another story that I was told. An old man lived near the river. He was about 90 years old, but he was still in good physical shape. Once, he went to the river for water. Suddenly, his heart ached. He fell, and he died. Preparations for the funeral began. Suddenly, while preparing, the old man got up and came to life. Everyone was very scared, but then they calmed down and began to ask what happened. He began to tell. When he walked to the river, his heart began to ache. Then his head started spinning. He lost consciousness. After a while, he woke up in an unfamiliar place. He stood on a flat rocky surface. There was fog everywhere. Nothing was visible. Suddenly, a deep, powerful voice rang out from above. He said name, surname, and patronymic, and asked if that was his name. The old man replied that, sort of, the surname was correct, the name was correct, but the patronymic was slightly different. There was silence for a while. The same voice from above asked if the old man was a pilot. The old man was surprised and said no. He said he had worked his entire life as a builder and then as a driver, but now he's retired. A furious voice sounded from above, addressing someone else. It said, "What person did you send me? I asked for a pilot, not a retired man. Bring this man back." Then the old man woke up while preparations for his funeral were beginning. A few months later, a plane crash occurred in Yakutia. One of the victims was the pilot, whose name and surname coincided with his name. Only the patronymics were different. The old man lived for several more years and then died of natural causes. And if you're curious as to what a patronymic is, it's a middle name. There are several stories about how the NKVD hunted very powerful shamans. This story is one of them. The NKVD later became the KGB. In a remote area, there lived an old and very powerful hermit shaman. A special team arrived in this area to catch the shamans. They settled in an administration building in the village. The team leader gave the command to 3 of his members to go to the shaman's hut, arrest him, and bring him here. After some time, the squad returned and reported that they had tied the shaman and brought him on a sleigh. When people left the building and went to the sleigh, they found that there was only a tied chair on it. The boss got very angry and asked what the hell this was. All 3 people swore that they had caught the shaman and brought him here. The chief became even more angry and ordered to gather an even larger squad, return to the shaman's hut, and really arrest him. If they play a joke like that again, he will personally execute them. The squad went on the road. After some time, the squad returned and said that the shaman had been caught, now, definitely, and stands tied up outside. He strongly resisted, and they could hardly bring him here. When everyone went outside, they saw a bull tied with ropes. The chief got angry more than ever, took out his pistol, and began to aim at one of the members of the squad. But suddenly, from the side of the road, someone shouted. A lonely old man walked towards them. He said that he was the shaman that they were looking for. He asked not to shoot people because they honestly did their job, although they failed. The chief began to aim at the shaman's head with the pistol. He stood for about half a minute and suddenly ordered the release of the shaman. The old man left. One of his subordinates asked why he did not shoot the shaman. The boss replied that at the moment when he was aiming at the shaman, he had a very strange feeling that he was aiming at his own head, and it was not clear at whom he would shoot if he pulled the trigger. This is another story about the same shaman. I feel like I can remember his name, but I forgot. Once, a group of young people came to the shaman's hut. It was a team of geologists. The shaman accepted them and offered to wait while he and his wife prepared food and set the table. The geologists said that they did not believe in supernatural abilities, that this was all nonsense, and asked the shaman to show his abilities if he had them. The old man turned to his wife and ordered her to bring an axe. His wife brought him an axe. The shaman put his foot on the table and bared it. He then took the axe and began to chop it down. The geologists got scared and fled to the village. They told the residents about the case, but the locals explained to them that the shaman decided to play a trick on them, and that, in fact, there was nothing like this. The geologists did not believe the locals and decided to stay in the village. A couple of days later, one of the geologists noticed a shaman who came into the village for food. The old man looked fine. Both of his legs were completely intact. Another time, with the same shaman, he decided to go to the village to visit a distant relative. He accepted him, and they sat down at the table and began to dine. The man said that he heard about the old man's abilities and asked to show them. The shaman asked the man to wait, that he would soon see for himself. They sat like this for a while, and they found out that they had ran out of bread. The owner of the house asked his son to go to the neighbors and borrow some bread. The son left the house, went to the neighbors, and after a while, a knock is heard at the door. The man opens up the door and sees a surprised son. He says that he was sure he was knocking on the neighbors. Then the man asked his son again to go to the neighbors for bread. The child leaves once again, and soon there was another knock on the door. The man opens, and once again it's his son. His son looks scared, frightened, and says that this time he definitely walked to the neighbors. The man began to suspect something and asked his son to go to the neighbors for bread the third time. The child barely agreed and left. Then the man looked out the window to see where the child was going, and he saw his son sprinting laps around the house in a circle. After a few laps, he stopped at the front door and started knocking. When the doors opened, his son began to cry and says that he does not understand what's happening. He is obviously scared. The man asked the old man for forgiveness and asked him to stop doing this. The old man agreed and asked the child to visit the neighbors again. This time, everything would be fine. The child refused to leave the house. The owner of the house then went to the neighbors himself and soon returned with more bread. And this is the last one I have for you. It was 1945, the end of World War II. A wife is waiting for her husband to return from the war with her son and her old mother. Time passes. Many soldiers return to the village, but her husband does not. At the same time, she did not receive any letter about his death. She went to a local hermit shaman to find out where her husband is. The shaman performed the ritual. The shaman also does not know where the man is, since it's not visible in either the world of the living or in the world of the dead. More time passes. One day, the same shaman came into the woman's house with an anxious expression on her face. She said that her husband will come to visit her tonight, but the woman must cook him his favorite dishes and talk to him. Then he will leave. But she shouldn't touch him, otherwise there will be big trouble. A woman tried to ask the shaman what it all means. The shaman said that she was forbidden to talk about it anymore, and then left the house. As time passes, night falls. Someone is knocking on the door. The woman opens the door, and there's her husband. He looked dirty and pale. He wore a big raincoat. The woman remembered the words of the shaman, and she didn't touch him. She and her mother began to set the table. The man sat at the table and began to eat. The wife asked him questions, but he didn't answer. Because of the noise, his son woke up. He saw his father. He ran up to him and was about to help his father take off his raincoat and wanted to hang it. After removing a cloak, everyone saw that the man wore a torn military uniform. There were bullet holes, many wounds visible in his body. The man got up from the table and started to approach the woman and his son. An old grandmother stood in his way. She screamed for the woman and her son to run away. She will detain him. They ran outside. They go to a neighbor's and explain the situation. A company of locals are gathered soon. They went to examine the house, and all they found was the dead old woman. There was a trace of inexpressible horror that was imprinted on her face. The soldier was never seen again, nor was he found. So, what'd you think of those? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have one of your own? I have an email in the description below that you can send them to if you'd like to, and I'll try to get back to you. Down in the description as well is a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to support the channel that way. There's also super thanks as well, but just watching, liking, subscribing, commenting is good stuff too. And with that, I think I will keep you no longer. I hope you enjoyed the video. There's probably going to be another video on Russia, so tune in for that. Until then, I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you for pulling up a stump. Thank you for watching.